About a year ago, I was one of the first people to check out one of Ugreen's new NAS devices, and for a first product in this market, it was very competitive. However, many moons have passed since then, so today I'm going to take a look at some of their devices from their lineup, the main one being their fully flash storage model, and see how Ugreen fares in the NAS market 1 year later. Note that this video is sponsored by Ugreen in an effort to promote World Backup Day. However, just like all of my sponsored content, all of the facts presented have been tested in good faith, and any opinions shared are genuine. I'll never provide suggestions for or promote a faulty product regardless of the sponsorship status. Fair enough? If not, then I'll see you in the next one. So Ugreen sent me 3 of their devices, their 6-bay 6800 Pro, the 8-bay 8800 Plus, and the 4-bay NVMe 480T Plus. The 6800 Pro and the 8800 Plus have pretty much identical specs with the exception of the amount of drives they support, obviously 6 and obviously 8. I'll have most of the specs here on the screen, but the main points are that it has a 10-core i5 1235U, 8GB of RAM with support up to 64, dual 10GB ports, dual Thunderbolt 4 ports, an SD card slot, 2 M.2 NVMe slots, and PCIe expansion. I've talked about it in previous videos, but the build quality on these devices is top notch, and honestly, it's the best I've seen in an off-the-shelf NAS. The mix of metal and plastic is done in a tasteful way, and even the plastic itself is high quality. The drive trays are hot swappable and have a pretty neat toolless mounting mechanism, which just makes for a nice user experience. In terms of specs, you really have everything you need here. Capable CPU, high-speed networking, plenty of storage options, NVMe slots, Thunderbolt expansion, and a PCIe slot. Like, really, they're well-made devices, but I'm even more excited about this all-flash DXP 480T Plus device. It's a compact 4-bay NVMe cousin of the other devices. This is meant less for mass storage and more for high-speed storage and hosting other services. I mean, it's just a cute little guy, right? It keeps the same vibe and high-quality build with the lone power button on the front and all of our I/O on the back. This includes dual Thunderbolt 4, USB 3, HDMI, a headphone jack, and 10GB networking ports. And just like the previous models, we've got the i5, 8GB of RAM, and the 128GB SSD boot drive. I installed 4 1TB Samsung Pro NVMe drives via the access hatch on the bottom, which by the way has a cool contact pin design which lets you pull off the entire cover, fan and all, without having to deal with any cables. Now, does this affect performance? No, but it's a positive user experience, and these things add up to help separate it from other brands. I didn't really want to spend too much time here on the hardware, since the gist of it is that it's great, I like it, and honestly, you can just look up the specs yourself. The fun stuff and equally as important part is the software, so let's talk about that. Setup is pretty straightforward. Just give your NAS a name and select if you want to be able to connect remotely using a Ugreen account, which is optional, so that's nice. Super cool that I forgot to hit record on this part, right? But once you've done that, your device will initialize and you can build out your storage array. I will say Ugreen has definitely cleaned up their UI and feels much more polished since the last time I checked it out. The interactive walkthrough when first performing tasks is nice for beginners as well. With 4 NVMe drives, you're probably going to run a RAID 5 setup, or if you're an adrenaline junkie, maybe RAID 0. Building out the array will take a bit of time, but you can still use your device in the meantime. Of course, the first and most important thing you have to do is set up a share, which they conveniently notify you of. I created a simple share that I'd like to be able to access from my Windows device, but it didn't work right out of the box. You have to go into the control panel and enable SMB, as it isn't turned on by default. I don't mind this, but I would have liked to see a prompt when you create your first share to also ask if you'd like to enable SMB. Ugreen, I know you're listening. But yeah, once we're done with that, we can log in with our admin user or whatever user you've given permissions to, and boom, we've got a network share. This is the most basic functionality of a NAS, and I'm glad they prioritized making this easy. Outside of SMB, you also have other sharing options like NFS, FTP, rsync, and WebDAV, so if those tickle your pickle, you'll be excited to see that. In terms of performance on that share though, here is a test of a large file transfer over 10 gigabit from a Windows client via SMB. Note that this is with my RAID 5 setup, so your results may vary depending on things like network speed, file type, transfer protocol, RAID configuration, all kinds of stuff. Other settings we have here are user/group management for device access, as well as network share access. Again, really intuitive to use. We can go into device connection and set our host name, as well as configure our remote access. They give you two options here for doing that, with the first using a Ugreen account, which acts like a tunnel to provide probably the easiest way to get to your device remotely. The second is if you have an external DNS service and want to enable DDNS to ensure your IP is properly set up and updated automatically. Then there's the third option, which isn't listed because it's the most manual, and that would be to use an existing reverse proxy in your network to route the traffic through manually. To be honest, that's probably what I do, since that's what I do for everything else in my home lab. Next, you can see we have the ability to access the terminal of the device via Telnet or SSH. In hardware and power, you can adjust things like the buzzer noise, fan mode, LEDs, power mode, and something called memory compression. You can also adjust when the device powers on, like after a power outage or using Wake on LAN, or even on a timed schedule. And apparently you can connect one of the compatible UPS devices to control what happens during an outage. In the network settings, you have your most basic shit, but there's also a tab for data control for easily limiting bandwidth for the plebs. Security-wise, we have some general options here that the average person is most likely just going to leave on the default settings. We do get an optional firewall if you'd like another layer of protection to the device, which I can't see most advanced users using since they probably handle all that on their main router, but for a basic setup, it's nice to have that option. Indexing service basically allows you to easily search through all of your files on your NAS via the file name, file type, and metadata. It'll also build thumbnails for your videos and photos. You can set which directories you want your search to work for as well, for instances where maybe you don't want a search for ice cream sundae with whipped cream to return some of your home movies. Normally, I'd just skip over the About section, but Ugreen has done a good job of putting a ton of useful information in here, like temperatures, network info, storage configurations, disk health, and what services you're running. So there you go. And last but not least, we have Update and Restore, which is where you update and restore. There are two options for generating a configuration backup, local and cloud. Local will just generate the file for you right there, but cloud will do this automatically, which is a nice feature. Then in the same panel, you can use one of those files to restore your system. So in terms of settings, I do think Ugreen has a nice balance here of giving you enough options to customize your device how you need it to, but not so many options to where you're overwhelmed. And again, they've really put in the work here to make their UI not just more visually appealing, but just more intuitive for the average user. Next, let's take a look at the App Store. Right off the bat, you'll notice that you're definitely not going to be overwhelmed with apps. There are only a handful here, which for some people may seem like an issue, and I get that, but as someone who just uses Docker to run everything, that's all I really need. There are some additional apps that I want to take a look at, like the Sync and Backup, Photos, and Video Center, which is Ugreen's Media Center app. Starting with what I think is the second most important feature of a NAS outside of just setting up SMB or NFS, and that's the ability to easily sync to and from a user's PC. Most people who buy a NAS like this are looking specifically for this feature to make sure the files on their MacBook or Windows PC or whatever are automatically backed up and safe. I've gone over this in my previous video, but it does look like they've updated it a bit. Immediately, I see that they added a link in the app to download the client to your PC. And just a heads up, the Sync client is built into the Ugreen app, which kind of doubles as a way to access the same kind of UI without a web browser. In here, we can go into the app and set up a sync task that will guide us through what kind of sync job we want. In our case, it's from our PC to the NAS, then the folder on our machine we want to sync, where we want it to be stored on the NAS, and it even comes with a default blacklist for file types or folders that you don't typically want to deal with, like temp files and stuff. Then tell it if you want it to be automatic or manual, and that's it. Your PC is now syncing to your NAS, or vice versa if that's how you have it set up. There's a similar thing to this called Backup and Restore, which pretty much does the same exact thing, except it allows you to select entire drives and folders to back up, so more designed for entire system backups rather than specific files. I mean, yeah, it's easy, works well, and keeps your data safe, so I can't complain. Moving on to our media apps. First, let's take a look at Photos, since I think this is going to be more popular than the Video Center. I started by uploading all of the photos from my recent trip to Japan. It did a good job at generating quality thumbnails to make it easy to quickly scroll through all the photos, and you can click on them and view them and check out the metadata as well. There is a filter feature on things like type, time, and location, but I would like to see the ability to add things like camera, lens, focal length, etc., all of which is stored in the metadata. Then you can create albums, of course, but I was surprised to see the different types. I'm just used to create an album and pick the photos you want, and that's it. Which is an option they have, but they also have a conditional album where you can select certain parameters to automatically create and maintain an album, then one for keeping track of your kid over time. Not sure how I feel about that one. In tools, we also have some interesting stuff. Things like check for duplicates, object detection, and the ability to train an AI model. All of this is turned off by default, which is the correct way to ship it. You can turn these on to try them out if you want. I initially went to do that, but then realized I didn't have 10 pictures of the same object to train, so maybe I'll revisit that. I turned on the object detection and let that run to see what it was about, and here are the results. So as a basic photo management app, it's pretty fun. It's like a mix of really basic features with some really crazy stuff thrown in. Now let's try the Video Center. When you first open it up, you'll create a library. So for this one, I wanted to make one for all of my legally obtained movies. I went ahead and created a movies folder and moved over some of my very much legally obtained movies. I mean, it works in that it provides a location to serve your media from, but you can see the variability in how accurately it could decipher some of the metadata for certain titles. In terms of playback, it's great. It'll even let you transcode the video down to a different resolution, which could be useful in certain situations, and it appears that it may be using hardware acceleration considering the CPU didn't spike at all. So yeah, it works. Cool. If you want to use it, neat. The last few things I want to talk about are what makes this device more of an actual server, and that's the Docker and virtual machine apps. The Docker app, well, lets you run Docker. The UI is pretty nice and kind of reminds me of Docker Desktop in a way. To get a container created, you can go search for the image from the image database or just upload one yourself. Then you can use that image to create a container. It's pretty nice having all the options laid out there all neat-like for you as well if you'd like to customize it further. You can even tell it to use the integrated GPU if you're running a container that requires it. I spun up Nginx as a test and it was super easy just as you'd expect. You can also go into the project tab, which allows you to use Docker Compose YAMLs if that's more your speed. Personally, I'm a Docker Compose boy. I just like having all of my setups in an easy to manage portable medium. To be honest, I think the Docker integration again hits that middle ground of being intuitive enough for a beginner, but not so stripped down to where a power user would have issues with it. And hey, if you want, just SSH in and handle all of that through the CLI. And last but not least, virtual machine management. Now I'm gonna go ahead and say it, Ugreen has the best virtualization app out of any of the off-the-shelf NASs I've used. And to be fair, the bar is very, very low, but it's solid. I wanted to try out one of the most basic deployments, and that is to deploy an Ubuntu server virtual machine. I went ahead and uploaded my ISO, created the VM, which prompted me for some necessary settings like the resources I want to provide, disk size, networking, etc. And just like that, the VM was ready to go. I was happy to see this isn't using some janky version of VirtualBox or something like that, so actually accessing the VM is simple. The installation went on without a hitch, and after a reboot, I had an Ubuntu VM all in under 5 minutes. Now, there doesn't seem to be very much customization here, so I don't expect this to replace your go-to virtualization hypervisor, but it's certainly good enough to spin up a couple of VMs without having to worry about fighting the jank. You can even create a share link that lets you access the VM via a web browser, so that's kind of cool. Oh, and we have snapshots for when you almost certainly mess something up and want to go back in time to when you weren't a complete dummy. Yes, I'll be using that feature a lot. So yeah, I know that was a lot, and yes, there are some things I didn't cover, but I really just wanted to take a peek back into the Ugreen NAS world to see if they've been putting in the work, and seems like they have. If you would have told me 2 years ago that Ugreen was going to be extremely competitive in the NAS market with multiple models, all with high build quality at a solid price, I would have told you you're a silly goose. So what do you think? Does Ugreen look like a promising ecosystem? If so, I have some links down in the description where you can go pick up one for up to 20% off if you want to snag one for World Backup Day. But that's all I have for you today. If you like this video, then drop a like and subscribe if you want to see more NAS content. I want to give a huge shout out to my YouTube members and my Patreons. You guys are my off-the-shelf NAS device with 10 gig networking and hella fast storage. Y'all are the best. And if you're still watching, you're a smart test. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next one.